Well, good morning and welcome to TBL, 25th of August. Got the month right this time. If you were listening to Two Voss Radio yesterday, if you had it playing in your car, you would have heard a familiar friend. I think he's a donkey, or is he a horse? He's a donkey. And I could almost, we miss Sister Doretta, don't we? I could almost hear her laugh at the Burger King joke. But yeah, I just hope Jesus will let her know so that she can rejoice with us. But Kerry and Colin, if you missed it yesterday, the link is there. And it's well worth watching. It's about 5 minutes into the programme. Programme's just over an hour. 5 minutes into the programme is Kerry and Colin, and then towards the end is the children who are at General Conference. So I think some people here would like to watch that. The very end of the programme, the last about 6 minutes, is the children's choir. So that was communicating with children. And this morning we're talking about communication. And communication is absolutely essential for a relationship. God wants a relationship with his people, and he wants his people to be in relationship with each other. And, there are all kinds of different ways of communicating. It's not all about talking. I know some people naturally like chatting more than others, and I'm probably one of those people. And I'm quite an open person. I'll tell you all sorts of things about myself. If it's my family, I tend to close off a little bit because I feel that's their story to tell. But I'm quite an open person, and I like to talk, I like to listen, I like to have friends. And some people like to talk a lot less than I do. Some people don't like talking much at all. But it doesn't mean that they're not part of the family of God and that they are in relationship with the other members of that body. And there are lots of different ways of communicating that don't involve talking. And we all need to be in communication this way, us and God, and in communication this way with each other. The old-fashioned, age-long, I don't know when it started, of shaking a hand. And I believe that was because most people are right-handed. They would use their right hand for a spear or a sword. And if they came to you like this, it showed they had no weapon. So they offered their open hand as a sign of peace, as a sign of friendship. No speaking, just opening their hand, showing they had no weapon to try and attack you. And if it was reciprocated, you took each other's hand, that showed it communicated something. It communicated something deeper than words, that you were offering a hand of friendship or at least peace, that it wasn't an enemy. I started thinking about creation and, potted history, whizzing through the book of Genesis. God made light, separated it from the darkness. God separated the waters and made heaven with waters above and below. And God made dry land come forth from the water, separated the waters. And once there was land, he said, let it bring forth grass, herb, fruit trees, all the different kinds of grasses. If you've ever been out, I think Saffron's been around my garden when she was a little girl. She wouldn't remember now. She was very little, and we collected as many different grasses as we could find. You wouldn't remember that, Saffron, probably. As many different grasses. There are loads of different grasses, with different patterns, formations, shapes, and different kinds of trees, all with its own seed for self-propagation. God made planets, giving light, days and seasons. It gave form and structure to time. He created time, and there was all this kind of calendar around us in the universe, the first ever timetable. And it would give mankind deadlines, targets within which to work, and an understanding of space and time, physics and engineering, when man started to, explore the orbits and the forces that are in our surroundings that God had created. There was an understanding that came of infinity and space and where God is and who God is. It wasn't a spoken word, it was just an understanding that was communicated from God. An understanding of the forces of nature and power. Then came an abundance of living creatures in the waters first, and then in the air, and then on the land, and finally man and woman. Again, two components of the same species, but communication, relationship. This does not strike me as a God who wanted to be alone. Does that sound to you like somebody who just wanted to be alone? He could have been on his own. He was alone. He was there. God is. But it doesn't seem like the picture of somebody who wanted to be alone. This expresses a God of abundance, a myriad of creatures living in harmony together. When you look up communication in the dictionary, the first one I found, which I didn't really like all that much, it says, the imparting or exchanging of information or news. And to me, communication is much, much more than imparting information. You know, information to my husband is, well, tea will be at 5:30. What would you like for tea today? Chicken or beef? You know, that kind of thing. Information. That's not what our relationship is about. That's not what a church is about, is just passing information. Yes, we have to pass information. We teach truth. But how much more is communication in a body of Christians? The love that's in a family, the love that's in the church. It's much more than exchanging information to me. Second one says means of sending or receiving information such as phone lines or computers. It's used in that context, satellite communications, etc. And then it says number 3, the means of traveling or of transporting goods. So roads and railways, they're referred to as communication, so you're taking something. But I liked the last one where it said the origin came from the Latin verb communicare, to share. Everybody say to share. Now, you can share a lot more than information, can't you? What kind of things can you share? Is your mind going now? My mind just goes, when you think to share, you could, yes. You can share possessions. You can share food. You can share transport. Give somebody a lift. Oh, you can share experience and knowledge. When you're playing the drums and I'm playing the keyboard, we're sharing an experience, an emotional and spiritual experience in that worship. It doesn't even have to have words. A lot of our songs do have words because we're communicating truth as well. But even when we're just playing our worship to God, we're sharing that experience. It's so much more enriching than just on our own, isn't it? When we come together and we worship together, we're sharing an emotion, we're communicating an emotion, we're communicating a thought process, we're sharing that atmosphere, that experience together. And when God's Spirit comes down, we're sharing that moment. We both know we're feeling God's Spirit touching us. And that's a communication that's far beyond, what was it? Exchanging information. So to me, communication's a lot more. Starting with verbal communication, which I know you all know. Pete, I know you know. Rena, we like to talk. But verbal communication isn't just talking. Someone needs to be listening. So when I'm blaring on, poor Rena's sitting there, she has to listen. and it's not just listening, it's listening with a heart. When I tell her about, what I'm going through, and I feel so sorry for myself sometimes, she's listening with understanding. And then do you know what she does? She goes away and she prays about it. And she's often given me texts, I'm praying for you. And the last 2 days, I have felt my strength returning, after COVID and the kind of weakness you feel. And the last 2 days, I've been so aware of God's strength coming back. I felt like somebody somewhere was praying for me. It just was over and above the normal healing that you feel. So there's listening with an understanding, listening with the heart, and perhaps acting on that. If you hear that somebody's short of food, well, you're going to give them a meal, aren't you? If you hear that, they've put on a lot of weight or they've lost a lot of weight and none of their clothes fit, perhaps you've got something in your wardrobe they can share. You reach out. Communication is far more than just the information. We could have a debate. That's another form of verbal, thinking of methods of verbal communication, types of verbal communication. It's not just talking, giving information. You could have a debate. And debates are really interesting because I love debates. I used to love debates at school. And I know Sean used to love debates because you take a topic and you're in friendship. So it's not about being enemies. In friendship, you take two polar opposite ends of that topic. And you decide together you're going to explore the different facets of that thing. And you can do that with biblical truth. Biblical truth can go levels of deep. You can learn a truth when you're 18 or 5, and then each decade of your life, that truth can apply to your life in a new way. And there are different facets of these truths, especially the truth of God is so deep. It's so simple, but it's so deep that it nourishes you the whole of your life. So when you have a debate, you can look at different aspects of a topic and you can learn by listening to the other person thinking, well, no, but I see it this way, or somebody could look at it that way. And it's all in good faith. It's just a debate or a discussion. How are they different? And what about written communication? So still on words. We're getting off words in a minute. But words, there used to be a thing that said paper and pen refuse nothing. In other words, something you wouldn't quite say to somebody's face because you're a little bit embarrassed that you feel so angry, you might write it down and send it as a letter, and then you might regret it the next day. And text, sometimes we can write things in texts that we wouldn't say it to their face. Be careful with written communication, but written communication can be very enlightening and very helpful as well. A group of people could have a question and answer session. We could write down a list of things we agree about. How many different types of language communication can you think of? And how many other types of communication can you think of? So this is where I'd like you to get into pairs or threes and have a chat, have a think, how many different types of language communication can you think of? So anything that involves language and words and maybe different languages. And how many other types of communication can you think of that don't involve words at all? Off you go. Well, we'll start taking some ideas back. We've got a young family here at the back, and we're talking about how a little toddler can communicate. Just say one or two things.
I was saying that obviously he knows a few words, but even if he doesn't, he'll try drag us to things. So if he wants something, he'll just drag us, hold our hands, and he's like that.
He's just pointing and dragging and paying peepo. I think he gets humour. So that communication is just innate in us, isn't it? With the desire to reach out and make our needs felt, make our opinions felt. What kind of things did you talk about?
We talked about tone of voice. Depending on, the person might be smiling at you, but because of the tone of voice that they're actually using, you realize that they're not happy with you, or they're very happy with you. And also, we talked about our children, how we could always tell when they were telling us the truth, because of our their tone goes higher. or,
Yeah,
what
it's,
else? Yeah.
yeah, I can also give out the, oh wow, yeah, and the face also, because someone say that she like looking at your eyes or your face, because your face is telling you, even if you may be smiling or have a nice tone, but your face also will tell whether whether you are telling the truth or you are not. So I think, yeah.
We also mentioned about different, although Sister Mercy might speak to me in Swahili, but and I don't understand Swahili, but because of her expression, I could see that she's happy, or that certain, she's trying to convey to me. Like you were saying that, she might be conveying to me certain things, and I can begin to pick it up.
Yes, I can really identify with that one. The grandma next door died recently, and she had started with Alzheimer's. But when we wouldn't understand each other's language, but when she was working the drive, and we'd communicate, and we both knew what, the friendship that was there. And even when she got dementia, one day I went into the house, and her face lit up, and the carers looked at me. They said, "She knows you." There was a friendship there. Amen. Any bright ideas from this corner?
Um, uh, we um, we thought about spiritual communication. So in the conventional sense of like speaking with God, and just connecting in that like spiritual realm, but also like the spiritual communication we can have between each other. Like for example, you might never know you could have not known a person, but you walk in a room and you get a certain vibe off of them. Like whether it's good or bad, sometimes you can walk in and immediately click with somebody, or you can be like, that person's a bit standoffish, or that person doesn't quite meld with me immediately. Um, so yeah, that was one of the ones that we were covering.
Yeah, we mentioned sign language as well, and we went through the senses. So touch, how blind people would touch somebody's face and communicate, so they know the shape of the face and the way they talked. Um, we lost it where we were doing taste, but then we thought food. Yeah, you can communicate with food. Is this nice? No, this is horrible. But you get that idea. But the things that we see, the things we hear. So we went through the senses as well as in terms of types of communication.
There you are. There's your bright idea. We knew it would be a bright idea from Pete. Any ideas here?
Yeah, we talked about things like Morse code,
Oh, yes.
and that I know during the war they had an Indian tribe that they tried to save a certain person from because he was keeping that language alive. So and there is something called Makatoon, is it something? Makaton, that's it. Yeah, that's a form of communication, and even that the trees communicate through the root system.
Whoa. I think this is the Bright Club back here.
We talked about attitude. We talk about the senses. We talk about body language. How somebody through their body language can convey, exactly what they're feeling, what they're thinking. The facial expression, and things like that.
Amen. Lovely. Anything from that corner? Yeah.
Okay, so Hazel thought of emojis, like the modern hieroglyphics. So, also thought about art in general. You think about like the portraits and artists of the past, how they conveyed their emotions and thoughts, and yeah, communicating that way. And also through music, you look at Dvorak or Vivaldi, how happy they and so forth.
Man, well done, Hazel. Emojis, what a good one. And the idea of saying it's modern day hieroglyphics. Oh, I like that. Saffron, have you got any bright ideas? Pastor will help you.
not sure about bright ideas, but we have things that were mentioned. The first one that we talked about was the look, because everybody as a child has experienced the look, especially from the mum that says you're in trouble now. Um, but we also looked at pictures and videos as a way of communication, singing, poetry. Saffron mentioned slang. I don't know what that is, but apparently slang. Patois, body language, and those are some of the things that we looked at as forms of communication.
Lovely. It's interesting that the two youngest members of this group have mentioned things on phones and technology. So the slang, and you could think text speak as well. Another way of communicating that's developing, and also the emojis and the text speak. Very interesting. Wow. Well, these were a few things I came up with. Maths. Oh, I love maths. And I think maths is like a different language. You can't explain it in words. You can explain some things in words, but I've heard so many maths teachers explain something and then the children don't get it. So they just say it again in the same words, just louder. And you think that's not going to help because they need some different way of approaching it if they're going to understand it. But maths is a language of its own. Numbers, shapes of functions, and you think of the way two things operate together in a pattern. Patterns of motion often can be understood in 3D forms visually, easier than they can be understood in words. Speaking of phones again, this is some of the Samsung methods of communication where you communicate with your watch and other phone companies have similar systems, but this Samsung software can detect the natural motions and signals that you make with your hand. Not only motion, but a subtle flick of the finger or a knock on the table. The watch on your wrist can control the phone in your pocket or across the room. Snap to start playing music or flick to go to the next song. Very clever thing. You know more about those things than I do. I'm just putting ideas out there. Sign language was mentioned, has transformed life for those without hearing or with limited hearing. They have signs for letters of the alphabet, signs for emotions, signs for words in common usage. Does anybody here know any sign language? Has anybody studied sign language? I think we're encouraging our churches to try and train somebody up so that you know a few words. All done. Help. And then if it's like that, stop. Anyway, there are a few there to give you a starting block. You can look it up online. Some people are more demonstrative than others. My dad was a very demonstrative. I think both my parents were. A lot of Welsh people are quite demonstrative. Are you a drama llama? We tease some members of our family, I will not name them, for being drama llamas. And here, I think this is maybe too small for you to see. Probably online people can see, but calm down. Yes! Or yes. Oh, no. Woohoo! And then praying, God, please. Some forms of physical expression, kneeling, reaching out. We had a wonderful lesson from Sister Diana about the different types of praise. And a lot of them use the body, not just words. What can you learn from the drama llamas in your family? It's pretty easy to know what's going on with them, isn't it? So that's one advantage. When is it helpful? Are there times when it gets in the way? Maybe when you don't need all the drama, you just need to get on with the solution. And some of you, a lot of you actually mentioned facial expressions can reveal a great deal about what a person is really feeling. Sometimes the look in their eyes doesn't match the words coming out of their mouth. There's a big spiritual lesson there. Could do a sermon if I had half an hour. Walk the walk, not just talk the talk, that kind of thing. How do facial expressions help us to communicate? I sometimes, if I see a video of myself and I think, why can't I just keep my face still? Because a lot of people just keep their, I'm there with my eyebrows going and my hands going. Mark says I can't talk if you keep my hands still. Actually, he did tie my hands behind my back one time and and then got me talking and my feet started going. So homework. 3 weeks' time, September the 15th, is communication part 2. So this was just a taster today, communication part 1, looking at just throwing it out there, blue sky thinking, what are the different ways that people communicate and the great wealth and richness of communication that brings relationship with God and between his people. So homework for 15th of September, please, is 2 things. Think about all the different methods of communication you can imagine. So get yourself a notebook, scrap of paper, just jot down as many different ways of communicating. We've scratched the surface today, but you can really make a project. Write down all the different methods of communication you can imagine. And then go down your list and see how each one can be effective in conveying the gospel of Jesus Christ and the character of God. A bit like what I was saying, walk the walk, not talk the talk. Your body language, your facial expressions, your demonstrative, your tools like, we didn't even start on online ministry. We did touch on technology, but go down your list and all the different ways of communication that you can think of. Try and think of an application. How can that be used in ministry, really, service, in communicating the gospel of Jesus Christ? And even if not that truth in words, how can it communicate the character of God? So often when we walk into somebody's house or we look over our fence at a neighbor, or we meet somebody in a shop or on the street, something of us can convey the character of God before we even open our mouth to speak. So have a think about the different ways of communication and how those can be used to convey the gospel of Jesus Christ and the character of God. Thank you.